Let me ask you something that most leaders avoid their entire lives. Because once you see the truth behind this question, you cannot unsee it. It changes how you see yourself, your team, your decisions, and the psychology behind your entire leadership identity. What if it's not actually you leading your team, but the wounds you never confronted? What if the tone you use, the pressure you apply, the silence you carry, the distance you keep, the intensity you project are not coming from your strategic mind, but from your unhealed emotional history? What if your leadership style is not a choice, but a coping mechanism? This episode is not comfortable. It's not polite. It's not soft. This is the kind of truth that shakes you, the kind that cuts through the mask, the reputation, the persona, and goes straight into the places where your leadership was really born. Stay with me until the end, because we are going into the deepest shadows of leadership, the place where childhood wounds, unconscious fears, evolutionary biology, and unprocessed trauma quietly run the show. And at the end, you get the usual H2H experiment of the week, a practice that will begin the process of breaking these patterns so you can lead from awareness instead of injury. So, to begin with, let's talk about the uncomfortable truth. The trauma does not disappear, it leads. Freud called it repetition compulsion, our unconscious tendency to recreate emotional patterns from childhood. Lacan reframed it through the other, the symbolic expectations and identities that shape our sense of self. Jung illuminated it through the shadow, the hidden parts of us that influence everything when we refuse to see them. Put all of them together, and the conclusion is painfully clear. Your team is experiencing your unresolved past every single day. If you fear conflict, you avoid hard conversations. If you fear rejection, you overplease or overwork. If you fear losing control, you micromanage. If you fear being significant, you dominate. If you fear being wrong, you silence dissent. If you fear being judged, you hide vulnerability. Trauma is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, invisible, and quiet. Sometimes it sounds something like, don't upset anyone. Just be quiet. Don't be too much. Don't ask for help. Don't show weakness. Every leader carries a history. But the most dangerous history is the one they refuse to acknowledge. Because what remains unconscious becomes automatic. And what becomes automatic becomes destiny. Now, let's look at this topic from an evolutionary angle. We like to think we are modern, intelligent, rational, but biologically, we're still ancient creatures trying to survive in a wild world. Your brain evolved in an environment where every threat was physical. A hustle in the bushes could end your life. A conflict with the group could get you cast out, which was equally deadly. So the nervous system learned to react first and think later. That same survival circuitry now sits at the head of companies, teams, and boardrooms. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a lion, your boss's disappointment, a silent room after you ask a question, a team member challenging your idea, or a risk decision that could fail. The nervous system reacts the same way. Flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. This is why leaders often explode, withdraw, overreact, or shut down. It's not logical, it's evolutionary. The tragedy is your team feels those reactions as instability, unpredictability, even emotional threat. You're not just being intense, you are activating survival responses in others. And a team in survival mode cannot innovate, collaborate, or even trust. Now, let's switch the view to neuroscience. Trauma changes the brain. Chronic stress shrinks the prefrontal cortex, the part that's responsible for rational thinking, empathy, emotional regulation, creativity, long-term planning. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the fear center, becomes hyperreactive. This is why leaders think they're being strategic, but they're being defensive. They think they are setting standards, but they are projecting fear. They think they are protecting culture, but they are avoiding discomfort. Your brain may look like an adult's, but the part making the decisions may still belong to a scared 8-year-old. And here's the hardest truth. If you do not understand your trauma, you cannot understand your leadership. Humans have a fascinating neurological ability called interpersonal resonance. Our nervous systems sync to each other. This means your team doesn't respond to what you say, they respond to what you feel. Your energy is the culture. Your triggers are the tension. Your silence is the fear. Your confidence is the safety. Your emotional maturity is the psychological safety. Paired with Jung's collective unconscious, we understand that teams unconsciously adopt and absorb the internal conflicts of their leaders. So, if you avoid conflict, so will they. If you hide mistakes, so will they. If you need validation, they will compete for approval and attention. If you rely on intimidation, they will operate from fear. The team does not imitate your strategy. The team imitates your nervous system. Now, I would like to share a bit of my personal journey as well, some personal story related to the topic of this podcast. Let me take you to a moment I'm not proud of, but one that really changed and is changing my life. Early in my career, during most of my career, I equated leadership with intensity. Move fast, push hard, deliver, never show fear. But underneath that confidence was a young boy who learned that love and safety were tied to performance. So I overworked, I overdelivered, I overcontrolled. Every deadline felt like a test of my worth. Every challenge felt like a threat. Every piece of feedback felt like a wound. It wasn't leadership, it was survival. And my team felt it. They mirrored my urgency. They absorbed my pressure. They adjusted themselves to my emotional volatility. I was not leading. My wounds were. At the moment I understood this truth, I started to change. Because you don't lead from your title. You lead from your wounds until you heal them. And I am still in the process of healing them. And I'm still in the journey of becoming a better leader for my team as well. Now, let me bring this to systems theory perspective. Organizations are living systems. Teams operate like families. Culture forms around the emotional patterns of the leader. Family system theory shows that anxiety flows downward. Emotional cutoffs create stagnation. Unresolved conflict becomes the group's identity. The leader's emotional maturity is the system's ceiling. Workplaces are no different. A leader with unprocessed anger creates a culture of fear. Unresolved insecurity creates a competition. Avoidance patterns create confusion. Attachment wounds create favoritism. Trauma patterns create instability. Your inner world is your team's ecosystem. And we all need to become aware of that. So Jung proposed a solution for this. Integration over perfection. Healing does not mean erasing the past. Healing means integrating it. Jung said, until you make this unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. We have used this sentence before in the podcast. In leadership terms, until you make your wounds conscious, they will direct your team and you will call it culture. Integration looks like noticing when the child in you is reacting, pausing instead of projecting, naming your triggers, separating present from past, responding instead of defending. Integration is not perfection. Integration is presence. It's the moment the adult finally takes the wheel from the child who's been driving in fear. So you might be wondering, okay, so how do we work on this integration? And that's where we bring the H2H experiment of the week, which is called the Trigger Journal. This one will challenge you, believe me, but it will also free you, or at least give you a clear path. For the next 7 days, do this. Every time you feel triggered, irritated, defensive, anxious, tense, controlling, withdrawn, write down 3 things. What happened outside? The situation. Describe the situation. What happened inside? The emotion. What were you feeling that moment? What did it remind you of from the past? The wound. So what have you experienced before that was reminded in this moment? By the end of the week, you will start seeing patterns. The same fears, the same emotional reactions, the same triggers, the same childhood echoes. And you will realize something extremely profound. Your trauma has been leading your leadership. But awareness is the beginning of liberation. All right, now let's start to wrap up. Your trauma is not your fault. Please keep that in mind. But healing it is your responsibility. Not just for you, but for the people who trust you, follow you, and shape their emotional lives around your decisions. Leadership is not built on your strategy. It is built on your nervous system. A regulated leader creates a regulated team. A healed leader creates a healthy culture. A conscious leader creates a conscious workplace. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this raw but necessary episode of the H2H experiment. If you'd like to continue this journey, you can find my reflections on LinkedIn, my essays on the ECXO platforms, my videos on YouTube, and also my books on Amazon, which is the HX Revolution. And there you can go deeper into these topics that we talk about concerning leadership and how to create better work environments inside out. Until next time, stay aware, stay kind, and stay courageous enough to meet the parts of yourself that are still waiting to be healed. Bye.